Hey, Clemson family. After Clemson's 28-20 loss at Miami last weekend, I think I have to end being one of the final holdouts and saying that this hasn't been a reloading effort for Clemson the last few years. It really needs to be a rebuilding effort.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Yeah, I may have gotten off that ship a little bit before you, but I'm shocked in myself that I believed this team had bigger aspirations this year because it's pretty clear they don't. I think the talent's there. I really believe the talent is there to get it done, but there's some fundamentals lacking, and there's some things fundamentally wrong with the program that have to get fixed if it's going to get back to what it was before.
Totally agree. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. This is season 2. We're kind of closing in on 100 episodes. I'll have to do the math at some point. We hope you're joining us on YouTube, where we have this obviously marvelous studio and software technology. YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Please join the conversation there. Add your comments. We don't pretend to have all the answers or the only valid opinions. We want to hear from y'all as well. You can also catch us on the major podcast apps, and we're on the socials at Clemson Kickoff. Just find us on your favorite platform there. We are mostly, however, on Twitter. We were there during the Miami game. I posted a few things when I could. It was more of the same, wasn't it? And I think that's what, to me, is indicative of this just not being a fast turnaround. There's not much hope for that, if any, quite frankly. And you hope that that motivates this team to go on a roll the rest of the year. But when you look at a team, especially like Notre Dame, which is very good in the trenches, and how Clemson got dominated in the trenches against Miami on both sides of the ball, quite frankly, especially the running game for Miami's offense when they had the ball, you have to say that there's a lot of work left to be done. And the keys will be, how are they going to find the way to do that? Probably more in the offseason than in preparing for NC State this week. And so I think Daniel and I are going to take a little bit of a bigger picture approach now, the rest of the season, kind of look at some issues. And this week, I think, is a good time to look at, hey, this team needs to rebuild. It doesn't need to reload, despite being a few plays away here and there from being undefeated. And that's true. A couple overtime games, a couple big mistakes against Miami, against Duke, pardon me, well, against Miami also, and one huge one against Florida State.
Yep.
I mean, yes, are they close? Yes, but the kind of mistakes they're making make it clear to me that this is more of a rebuild, that this isn't something you turn around and fix in 1 week, much less even a bye week that they had and couldn't come into the Miami game looking more prepared and more complete.
Well, I think, Bill, the point that you made there about being dominated in the trenches, that's where all of this starts. All of it. The turnovers are the turnovers are the turnovers. They're last in the country in fumbles lost. They're not throwing a lot of picks, even though Cade Klubnik did throw one on Saturday. It's the fumbles. It's the fundamentals of holding the ball and protecting the ball and valuing the ball. All that's true. But they are getting whipped up front. And they got whipped up front on Saturday. And they couldn't run the ball, and they couldn't stop the run. And I don't care what scheme you run. I don't care how many skill position players you have on offense or defense. All that's great. It's gravy if you can't stop the run and you can't run the ball. That's football. And it's always going to be football. And this team, the offensive line is not good. The missed assignments on offense are startling and maddening 7 games into a season. And then on defense, Miami in the second half of that game got 4 yards every time it wanted it. Every time. And the hitting the wrong hole, fitting the wrong hole. You heard Dabo mention that after the game. Linebackers fitting the wrong holes, linemen being in the wrong spot. That stuff should not be happening 7 games into a season for this kind of program. And Dabo mentioned, this feels like 2010. It absolutely does. That's the way that team played. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't run the ball, and they fumbled and they had turnovers. Now a lot of them were interceptions back then, but the turnovers were a different kind of turnover, but they were still turnovers. No, I'm with you. This team is a long way away from being back to what it was. And they just won the ACC title last year.
Right.
They were, if they beat South Carolina, they're going to the playoff last year. But the losing in the trenches and the turnovers are the story of this season. There's nothing else. You could talk about progress. You could talk about players getting better. We can talk about, the good play from the freshmen. All that's true. But the story of this season is turnovers and getting beat in the trenches. And that is, I don't know what to do about it. It was a coach. And Bill, the turnovers, the Duke game, we came out of the Duke game and Dabo talked about fluky stuff. Okay, that's fine. This is 3 years of this now, or 4 years of this. Before they had Trevor and Travis to cover up a lot of this stuff. This is not new. And now they don't have as much talent as they had before. And I don't think they have as good of a coaching staff as they had before. And I don't think that can be argued. Look, I'm not taking shots at Dabo. I'm not taking shots at the coaches who were there. Some of them been there for a while, but it's clear there's a slide in the coaching staff. And I think that's impacting what this team's able to do.
Yeah, too many times that this team hasn't been prepared, and frankly, not necessarily lack of preparation for the opponent, just lack of preparation mentally, not just assignments. But, one interesting thing I really heard after the game, Will Putnam talking about maybe some guys are trying too hard. Maybe some guys are overthinking their assignments, where they should be, and not just practicing to get all that down so that when they get that game time, when it's time to play the game, that it's innate and that they can go out and just be physical and not have to think about those things. And that's something several weeks ago I brought up something similar along those lines, and he's done a better. Well, I've had a hard time repeating what he said, but he did a much better job in his quote of articulating kind of what I was getting at. Like, our guys are the Clemson players really, prepared mentally, psychologically to get out there and fight, right? To show that dog in them. And you look at some of the offensive linemen maybe being on their heels a little bit. You look at sometimes the running backs are out of position to pick up a blitz, or the running back or the tight end, after they chip a guy or decide not to block a guy at all, which can be in a playbook, will go to a part of the field where the quarterback is not going to be able to see them. Those kind of things that you need to carry onto the field and be confident about and be aggressive about. And it's just not taking shape. And then you talk about protecting the football, get the ball high and tight. I mean, that was a Hard Knocks thing long ago. Bill Parcells and tight end Marcellus, not Marcellus Wiley. No, he was on the defensive side. Martellus Bennett. Sorry, Martellus Bennett. And one of the coaches was all high and tight, Martellus, get the ball put away and tucked away. You heard it over and over again. And you used to hear Jimmy Johnson before that with Dallas and with the Hurricanes and with the Dolphins. He would stress protect the football. He didn't want to put the thought in those guys of don't fumble the football.
Right.
He stressed protect the football.
Exactly.
Talk about what you are supposed to do, which is something when I've been a manager, I've tried to stress that as well, right? Make that the beginning and ending thought in the conversation. And you hope that these guys can find a way to shake what's in their heads, poorly thought out Dabo Swinney humor attempts notwithstanding, whether it's just one-on-one conversations with coaches, whether it is bringing in team psychologists, whatever that might be, unlock what is in them, because we see that talent. And basically we see it the majority of the plays in all these games. I mean, I might not say that about the Wake game, but the Duke game, they marched up and down the field. Miami, they racked up all kinds of yardage. I mean, you've seen them, do things well and do things often. They played their best game of the year against their toughest opponent of the year in Florida State. Although now you and I might be back to disagreeing about Miami's level of quality and how good they are, because with a backup quarterback, they were able to do a lot of things right all around the rest of the field. The other 21 spots on the field, they did a lot of things pretty well and very effectively, and allowed him to be kind of a Trent Dilfer game management quarterback in his first start and be effective in that role. Clemson defense shouldn't be allowing that to happen. This defensive line should be more dominant in that. I know Justin Maskell got hurt. I know Peter Woods was playing hurt. You've got, maybe against Miami, the 4-2-5 scheme was not the right scheme, especially after halftime when you can see, hey, yeah, this is a Miami team that's capable of run blocking. Wes Goodwin and the coaching staff needs to adapt, get a third linebacker on the field out there. Is that Wade Woodaz? Is that the role he's cut out for? Is it Kobe McLeod? Is he better suited to try to get up and help the run fits? If the safeties aren't doing it, if you're in a 4-2-5, you got to bring in a bigger body and a bigger, better run stopper and someone who can tackle. And we've seen the quality of tackling not be as good this year. You and I have texted about that a lot during games. There's something that's not coming together and enabling these guys to be their best version of themselves all the time. And this certainly is the opposite of a fire Dabo type of topic, but it's like,
no, not at all.
What's going to happen? Are there some assistants that need to be replaced? I have a couple of names in mind. I'd like to see the season unfold a little more before we get into that, because I'm not so sure that that's really a mid-season answer, even though I forget which team it was fired their Arkansas fired their offensive coordinator after 8 games. That may be a little bit of desperation with if the head coach is feeling the hot seat kind of thing. Dabo Swinney's not Gene Chizik. You don't have to let him go so soon after national titles. He's got a much more complete approach to running a program and running it the right way and taking care of his players in a lot of ways that are allowable, despite what you might hear the national media say about Dabo not wanting players to have things. He's given them a great facility. He's given them tremendous off-field support staff. I'm not saying it's the only school that does it, but certainly among some of the best in giving these guys a chance to set up for life down the road. They've got to find the competitive fire again. They've got to find that want to. They've got to fire up the give a bleep train a little bit, maybe. Or maybe they've got to allow guys to be a little more comfortable. And the other thought I have along those lines, I've been talking too long, I'll let you jump in, is despite wanting guys to be comfortable, you also have to balance that with responsibility. And when guys are fumbling and they're right back in there on the next series, when guys are missing their fits, missing their gaps, and they're right back in there the next series or next possession, how do you get it through to these guys that, hey, there are stakes if you can't come through on what you need to do? And much as I want to say protect the football all the time, negative reinforcement, and hitting that pain point are true tools that are available to managers, to coaches, to say, look, it can't all be positive all the time. Once in a while, I've got to remind you that there are consequences if you're repeatedly not coming through on a fundamental aspect of playing the game and fulfilling your responsibilities on the field.
Well, a couple things. The fundamentals are atrocious with this team across the board. The fumbles, the missed assignments on the offensive line, the quarterback running a play that was not supposed to be run. And I'm so sick of hearing I was just trying, followed my instincts. I was trying to make a play. I've been around enough teams that there's been a couple of times I've been around teams, let me say it this way, where I've heard coaches say somebody's got to make a play. Well, that's the coach who is not putting the players in position to make a play, to make the right play. That's a coach trying to get the players to bail them out. And if you go back and watch the replay of the 4th and 1. Go back and watch it.
The final play of the game.
The final play. The right side of the Clemson offensive line collapses the Miami defensive line. For one of the few times of the night, Shipley walks into the end zone and scores if he gives him the ball. It's not even close. Not close. It's a touchdown. Now, do they score the 2-point conversion? Heck, I don't know. Probably not. But you can't do that as a quarterback. I get, quote, making a play when the play fails. We see that in football all the time. We saw it with Deshaun Watson. We saw it with Trevor Lawrence. You see it now with Caleb Williams. You see it in the NFL. All that's true. You can't be a robot back there. But if they call a play and it works, you you give him the damn ball. And you don't try to be Superman.
Right.
And I get that he's a young quarterback. I get that. But here's to your point. There are no consequences for him because they don't have anybody behind him who can push him. They don't have anybody behind him who he could say, ooh, if I do this again, I did it to, oh, sorry, knocked my mic over. I'm so upset. I did it in the Florida State game, right? Threw the swing pass where it was not supposed to be thrown. And now I've done it twice. And the 2 games they've lost in overtime, he's made plays like that. And I'm not criticizing. I mean, look, I love Klubnik. I think he's going to be a good player. But there has to be consequences for making mistakes. You remember when Kelly Bryant was the quarterback and the offense was kind of sputtering? And they took him out. And I know they had a generational college football quarterback behind him, and they don't have that now.
Right.
But you have to have somebody challenge them. Will Shipley, really good football player. He looks like he's lost a step to me. He doesn't look as quick this year. He doesn't look as fast. He doesn't look as decisive, whatever you want to say. Still a really good player.
Yeah.
Fumbles the ball at the 1 yard line. The next time they get the ball, he's right back out there. And you texted me during the game. There have to be consequences. And I know they're your best players.
Sure.
But there have to be consequences. Now, you also can't have your best players making those mistakes. I mean, that's huge. The tackling is atrocious. The tackling, every time they tackle, not every time, most of the times they tackle, the guy falls forward and gets 2 more yards.
Yeah.
Right?
All too often.
Or, I mean, this goes back to the Duke game. Remember the first drive in the second half? Again, one of your best players misses a tackle and Leonard runs for a touchdown because Barrett Carter missed a tackle. And the other night, the whole second half, you're thinking, why aren't there 9 guys in the box? Make this quarterback beat you. Or when they line up 3 guys on the wing, at wide out in front of each other, I know they're going to throw a screen. Why aren't there more people out there? So there's some fundamentals about this team that are not good. But then there's also some things fundamentally about the program that have taken a slide. Look, I mean, I'm not saying Dabo should be fired. I would never say that.
No.
But I'm with you. I think he's got to take a long, hard look at this coaching staff. And he fired Brandon Streeter after last year. Brandon Streeter would be outperforming several of the coaches on the staff right now, or he did outperform. And he got fired. And they changed the scheme, supposedly, although it still looks like the same scheme. But he got fired. So is that going to happen again this year? I hate calling for somebody's job. I know I do it. Joke, I text you a lot and like, this guy should be fired. This guy should be fired. And in real life, I know what it means. People's families are affected. That sucks. But if you're getting paid that kind of money to do the job and you're not doing it, I would get fired.
Yeah.
If I wasn't producing, if I wasn't doing my job or what my boss wants me to do. I'm not saying I'm not the best at it. I'm not close. I know where I fit into the scheme. But, people get fired every day because they don't do their job. And something has to change moving forward. It can't just be, this is who we are. Well, okay. I mean, and Bill also, maybe Clemson fans need to change their expectations.
Some absolutely do. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a championship program right now. It's not. Right. It's not close. And I know they won the championship last year in the conference. That's fine. And we'll find out what conference they're going to be in the next 5 years. Who the hell knows? Right. But I mean, they are not close to being Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State. They're not close. Not absolute. Like if they'd have played Georgia, if they'd have squeaked into the playoff last year and played Georgia, they would have gotten their doors blown off of them. I believe that. Absolutely believe that. And Dabo's done a great job with Clemson. He's done a job that we would have never expected 15 years ago.
Oh, sure.
Nobody would have expected this. So and I trust that he can get it back to that. I do. I've seen him do it. I say my old line is, you see the sun come up for 53 years, you're starting to trust in it, right? I trust in him, and I trust that he can get it back to that. But I don't know that this staff is the staff that can do it. He's done this before where he's made tough decisions.
Right.
He did it with Billy Napier. He did it with Kevin Steele. He did it with Brandon Streeter. He might have to do it again. Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, that if that's what it is, that's what it is. But even next year with a 12-team playoff, are they a playoff team going into next year? I don't think so.
No, and I think that's the difference. Like now we can't predict. Like, look, every week I go into the Notre Dame game will be the first game in years and years that I will go in thinking that Clemson cannot win that game because of how good Notre Dame is in the trenches. They've showed it the last few times they played us. They've got a shot to show it again, and I expect that they will based on what we saw against Miami, which I think is a lesser team in the trenches than Notre Dame.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, every other game the rest of this year is winnable. But when you look at Clemson needing to go into rebuilding mode and stop trying to prop up the ship a little bit and give a guy an oar that's been duct taped together, let's take a more big picture look at these next games. Let's not call the plays that we think, well, this might help us take a lead here. This might help us there. No, work on the things that need to happen for the long haul to get these guys ready to compete next year. Because frankly, Clemson is only a few plays away from being undefeated or still being, in the ACC championship game picture, maybe being a playoff berth team. They're also a few plays away from having a lot more losses, having a lot less success, having no close games, right? How many times has this defense bailed out the offense after costly turnovers?
The whole game. Yeah.
Absolutely. So stop looking at this as let's get the quick fix, and let's start looking at this as let's get the holistic fix. Let's get the long-term fix. And sometimes that means as soon as Will Shipley fumbles the ball, he's out. And if Maffa fumbles on the next play when Clemson gets it back, he's out. And you're going to Thomas, or you're going to Adams, or you're going to Green. I know Haynes is hurt again. Rough week medically for the Tigers, by the way, with Mickens needing an appendectomy, Haynes with a new injury, Antonio Williams with a new injury, Justin Maskell with an injury. Like those are, other than Haynes, those are contributors. Those are guys, those are dudes. Again, I thought NC State should be a win for Clemson, and with all those injuries now, it feels much more up in the air to me. Walker Parks is already out for the year. So you're looking at all these guys who are out. You're looking at the fact that the stakes are much lower now. You're not trying to get a playoff this year, but it expands to 12 teams next year. So I think there is a need to get this team ready for next year, and that may mean a few more reps for Vizina in case Klubnik can't cure this trying to do too much thing that he's stuck in. Maybe you need to let Vizina see the speed of the game out there. Not huge doses. You don't want to turn them into David Carr, Derek Carr's old brother, who the Texans absolutely ruined by having no offensive line and by him having to step in against some NFL speed pass rushes and tight coverage windows. You don't want to lose Vizina, but you do want him to start getting a few more reps under his belt and get ready. You know, if Hunter Helms is your number 2 guy, get him some more reps. Let him come in. If Klubnik's going to do something boneheaded in the heat of the moment, get him on the sidelines and let him watch a few series. Let him watch a possession. So, you know, that to me, in enforcing some of the things they used to enforce, and then having those coaching moments, having that ability to pull a guy aside and say, hey, you know, you're going to watch, and here's what you're going to watch for. And having that discussion after that possession and saying, hey, what did you see? What are you going to do differently now that I'm putting you back in? I think those things can be very important and very helpful on both sides of the ball. And I think really, again, just admit that you're rebuilding here. Just see the big picture and say, look, you know, the only way to find a silver lining in all this isn't to, you know, get a better bowl bid than the Duke's Mayo Bowl. The silver lining is that 12-team playoff next year. And how do you get guys ready to be that full version of themselves that so many times this year they've been so close to being and couldn't quite, you know, tie the knot in the bow and get it done.
Well, I love that Dabo does say this is who we are. I mean, this is who we are this year. There's no excuses.
Finally.
Right. Finally. I mean, you can say, and both can be true. Yes. Right. You can say we're 1 or 2 plays away and this is who we are. Because he does say we're 1 or 2 plays away, but we're not that. You know, there aren't any excuses. That's just who they are this year. And look, Bill, I mean, you don't want to accept that as a fan, right? Because we don't want to, if you're a Clemson fan, you don't want to go back to the Tommy Bowden days. You don't want to go back to the Ken Hatfield days or my God, you don't want to go back to the Tommy West days. So, but you don't want, let's just start with Tommy Bowden. You don't want to go back to those days where you couldn't even win the division when Florida State wasn't Florida State with a capital FSU. It wasn't. Right. It was not good. And they couldn't even win the division. Boston College won it. Wake won it. Clemson couldn't win it. So you don't want to go back to that. But how do you keep that from happening? Well, in this day and age, there is a way. I mean, there's a way to have quick fixes. And you know, I know that everybody, you know, that there are people out there that want every program to be run the same way, and that's not the case. It doesn't have to be run the same way. Right. But when you have deficiencies in your roster and you don't use something that's at your disposal, you're hurting the program. You are. I mean, it would be like, well, we're not going to recruit 5-stars. Well, why not? Because, well, this is our way.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, and look, I'm not portal guy. I'm not beating the drum about the portal. But you have to start to use the portal. Right. And where could they use the portal right now for next year? Offensive line, wide receiver, kicker. They couldn't find a better kicker in the portal? Yes, they could. Somebody who they could trust? Yes, they could.
Right.
So, I mean, there are answers out there, but you have to be willing to use them. And we'll see if he's willing to do that.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into that in depth. Ooh, that doesn't sound good.
Sorry about
We'll
that.
get into that in depth in another episode. I've got some thoughts on that too, and you and I sound like we might be on a little different pages, so maybe that'll be a better conversation. I do think there's going to have to be a lot of big thinking to turn this thing around, and I think that's that possibility of the transfer portal and other things that he hasn't done in a long time, Coach Sweeney, is a big part of it. So let's close it on that note. We're running out of time here. Catch us on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. you'd think I could say it. YouTube.com/Clemson kickoff. You can tell I'm a print guy by nature, right?
That's right.
Leave your comments in there. Tell us where we're getting it wrong. Tell us if you want to agree and build on a point we made. That's fine too. Subscribe and you'll get all our updates. We'll keep coming at you once a week as each game is done, and we'll keep taking this bigger focus rather than breaking down the specifics of each game. And since I can't talk, I'm just going to say until next time, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.